In the depths of space, a signal reverberates through the void, human in origin. The galaxy, used to seeing Earth as little more than a distant, insignificant world, soon realizes that humanity has unlocked something far more dangerous than technology alone. The techno mages of Sol are rising, and they wield a power that blends the arcane with the mechanical, reshaping the very fabric of reality. As galactic empires send their fleets to silence Earth, they are about to learn the most dangerous truth of all. Humanity has become the new masters of the universe. The question is, will they fight to survive, or will they evolve beyond the stars? It started with an anomaly, a signal faint yet unmistakable, drifting from the depths of space. It wasn't much, just a small fluctuation, a whisper in the endless void, but there was a pattern to it, a deliberate cadence, almost as if it were alive. And that made it different. Something in the way the signal pulsed intrigued me. It wasn't random, and it certainly wasn't the product of some natural event. It was engineered, crafted with purpose. I'd spent years of my life chasing signals, anomalies, patterns that hinted at something greater out there. But this was different. There was no reason why a human signal should be drifting out there, deep in the blackness, so far from the reach of any human colony. Earth had long since established itself as the cradle of humanity, but our reach was still limited. We hadn't yet colonized the galaxy. And yet there it was, a signal, a beacon, floating in the cosmic ocean. I remember standing at the observation deck of the starship Intrepid, my fingers gripping the cool metal railing as I stared out into the endless expanse of stars. The stars seemed so distant, so cold, and yet here, in the infinite blackness, was a message. Someone, or something, had sent it. And it was human. That much was certain. I wasn't the only one to notice. The signal was quickly picked up by other deep space observatories. The old galactic powers, with their advanced sensors and fleets, took immediate interest, but as they ran their scans, they couldn't trace the origin. That was the first clue. Whoever had sent this signal had somehow cloaked its source, masking its point of origin so perfectly that no one could find its precise location. That kind of technology or magic was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. I'd been assigned to investigate, and at first I thought I would be chasing shadows. Yet with every passing day, the signal grew clearer, more defined. It seemed to almost pulse with purpose, as if it were calling to something, to someone. As the message became more distinct, I began to understand something deeper was at work. It wasn't a simple transmission. It was an invitation. The powers that ruled the galaxy, the ancient empires with their fleets and weapons, didn't see the signal for what it truly was. They saw it as an oddity, something that could be dismissed, something that didn't demand their attention. The arrogance of these empires, always so certain that their vast power would keep them safe from anything new, was evident in their complacency. But they didn't understand humanity. They had never understood us. As I dug deeper, the mystery only grew. I learned that the signal wasn't just a message, but a gateway and entry point into something far more complex. The signal was pointing towards something hidden, something ancient. And as the days wore on, I began to realize that what we were on the cusp of discovering would change everything. Earth had always been home to humans, our birthplace, our cradle. But I knew that this was not just about Earth anymore. The signal wasn't from our time, not entirely. It was as if humanity's past had left behind a trace, something that had been forgotten, something far older than our civilization, a hidden legacy, buried deep within our own history. The more I investigated, the clearer it became. This signal wasn't simply a beacon, it was a key to something far older than Earth itself. It was as though we were being guided toward an ancient power that had been waiting for us, hidden beneath the surface of our own history, our own understanding of the universe. I found myself obsessing over the possibilities. What if this signal was part of a larger network? What if humanity wasn't the first to stumble upon this ancient technology? What if the Techno mages of Sol, as they would come to be known, had discovered something that would change the very fabric of space and time? At first I thought it was madness, fanciful thinking from someone caught up in the mystery. But the more I researched, the more the pieces fell into place. The signal was unmistakably human in origin. It was an invitation to explore, to discover the power buried within the fabric of the cosmos itself. And I had no doubt that humanity had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the right moment to step beyond the boundaries of our world and into something much greater. I knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The Techno mages weren't just a story or a myth. They were real. And we were about to uncover the power that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. As the signal continued to pulse and grow stronger, I realized that we had only scratched the surface. The galaxy would soon learn what humanity was truly capable of, and nothing would ever be the same again. The signal had led me to a place no one had ever expected to find: a remote, almost forgotten corner of the Sol system. It was a place too far from the bustling colonies and commerce routes, an area that was ignored by most, even though it lay within the reach of Earth's grasp. But as I set my course and approached the coordinates provided by the signal, I realized the significance of this place. It wasn't just an isolated spot in space. It was a deliberate hiding place, a location that had been carefully concealed from prying eyes for reasons I could not yet understand. As I drew closer, the sensors on my ship began to pick up something strange, a subtle fluctuation in the surrounding gravitational field. It was barely detectable, almost as if the fabric of space itself had been distorted. This wasn't natural. Someone or something had tampered with the very structure of space to keep this place hidden. It was as though the laws of physics had been bent to ensure no one could stumble across it by accident. I engaged the cloaking protocols and slowly approached the source. There, beneath the pale yellow dust of Saturn's rings, a massive structure came into view. It was hidden in plain sight, tucked into the shadows of the planet's rings. It was no moon or asteroid, nor was it a natural formation. The structure was something far more complex, something engineered with intent. The shape of the facility was almost organic, as though it had grown into existence rather than being constructed. Its surface was covered with a pattern of symbols, runes, or markings that I didn't recognize. They pulsed faintly, their glow shifting with a rhythm that felt almost alive, like a heartbeat. This was no ordinary human project. The structure's design was like nothing from Earth, and certainly not from any civilization I'd encountered during my time in the galaxy. It was as if the facility had been designed by a different set of rules that transcended anything we knew about engineering or architecture. The markings that covered the structure weren't mere decorations, they were a language, a code. And that code, I realized, held secrets far beyond our current understanding. I docked my ship in a small, concealed bay within the facility. As I stepped onto the metal floor, I could feel a strange energy in the air, something intangible, but undeniably present. The walls of the facility seemed to hum, vibrating at a frequency that resonated deep within my chest. It was as if the very building was alive, aware of my presence, waiting for me to take the next step. Every step I took echoed in the empty corridors, the silence almost suffocating. The further I ventured into the heart of the facility, the more I felt like an intruder. I wasn't just walking into a building, I was stepping into the unknown, into a place that held secrets humanity wasn't ready to face. Yet I pressed on, my curiosity burning brighter than my fear. The signal had led me here, and I knew that I was about to uncover something that could change everything. The facility was vast, extending deeper into the asteroid's core than I had anticipated. As I moved deeper into the structure, I began to see signs of activity. There were humans here, but not in the way I had expected. They weren't just scientists or researchers, they were something more. They moved through the corridors with a quiet, deliberate purpose, their eyes focused, as though they were part of something much larger than themselves. These people didn't look like ordinary engineers or technicians, they looked like priests, like devotees of a forgotten religion. Their clothing was simple, yet purposeful, adorned with symbols that matched the markings on the walls. And their eyes, glowing faintly with an eerie light, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just manipulating technology, they were wielding it as a form of ritual, blending science with something else, something ancient. They paid no attention to me as I moved through the facility, as though my presence was neither important nor surprising. They seemed to know what I was there for. They were part of something that had been in the making for centuries, perhaps longer. I couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on me as I walked past them, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing. Finally, I reached the central chamber, the heart of the facility. It was a massive room, unlike anything I had seen before. At its center stood an enormous device, its shape indistinct, but its power unmistakable. The machine was both technological and organic, as though it had fused the two into one seamless creation. It pulsed with energy, sending ripples through the air, distorting the very space around it. And standing before it were the Techno mages, the humans who had mastered this power. They weren't operating the device in any conventional way. There were no levers, no buttons. Instead, they stood before it, their arms raised as if channeling energy through their bodies, their movements like intricate dances that seemed to follow the rhythm of an invisible force. The machine responded to their motions, growing brighter, its hum growing louder with each passing moment. This was not just technology. It was something else, something that bordered on magic, an unholy union of the two. I stood in the doorway, watching them, unable to move. The reality of what I was seeing crashed into me with such force that it took my breath away. These humans weren't just manipulating machines. They were weaving spells into the very fabric of the universe itself, bending space and time to their will. And that was when I understood the truth. The Techno mages of Soul had discovered something ancient, something powerful, and they had unlocked a force that could reshape the galaxy itself. The revelation hit me like a wave, each new realization deeper and more overwhelming than the last. As I stood there watching the Techno mages weave their silent rituals around the massive, pulsing core, the air itself seemed to hum with a kind of unearthly power. It wasn't just the device that drew me in, it was the humans themselves. Their movements were fluid, precise, as if each gesture was part of an ancient dance, an ancient commandment spoken through body and will. The energy they were channeling was beyond anything I had ever seen, a raw, chaotic force that was somehow controlled, focused through their collective will. I watched them work, transfixed. They were not merely interacting with technology, they were becoming one with it. There was no interface, no control panels, no switches. The energy of the device responded to their motions, their thoughts. The way their hands hovered over the air, the way their fingers twitched, it was as though they were pulling the very fabric of the universe itself and weaving it together into something new, something alive. I had seen powerful technology in my travels across the galaxy, from the Draxian battle cruisers that could decimate entities to the ancient artifacts left behind by civilizations long gone. But nothing compared to this. This wasn't mere technological advancement. It was an evolution of something far more ancient, far more profound. They were blending science with something much older, something that existed before even the first stars had begun to burn. Magic. Or what the universe itself might consider magic. It took me a long moment to realize that I was holding my breath. I had never seen anything like this. The device in front of me had no discernible purpose. It wasn't a weapon, not in the conventional sense. There were no guns, no lasers, no missiles. It was something beyond that, a force that seemed to tear apart the rules of physics and rebuild them according to its own logic. The Techno mages didn't need to understand it in a conventional way. They didn't need to know the science behind it, they just knew how to manipulate it, to bend it to their will. And the device responded in kind, amplifying their commands, their thoughts, their energy. I stepped closer, careful not to interrupt the flow of their work. They moved like a synchronized orchestra, their motions fluid and purposeful, but there was no conductor, no single leader. It was as though they were a collective mind, their thoughts moving as one, their intentions unspoken but understood by all. The device responded to this collective will, rippling with energy, its surface glowing brighter with every movement. Then, without warning, the light from the machine flickered, dimmed, and then surged in a powerful wave. So bright it felt like it could burn through everything in its path. The air around the device warped as if the space itself was being stretched, pulled in strange, unpredictable directions. I could feel the very structure of reality bending, twisting, as though the laws of physics were being rewritten in real time. It was like a storm was passing through the very heart of existence, and it was impossible to tell whether it was an act of creation or destruction. For a brief moment, the world around me seemed to shift. The walls of the chamber blurred, the edges of the room fading into a deep, unnatural blackness. I felt weightless, as though gravity had ceased to exist. My heart raced. The sensation was so intense that I had to brace myself against the walls. But the Techno mages didn't flinch. They didn't even pause. It was as if they had anticipated this, knew exactly what would happen. Then, as quickly as it had come, the wave of energy receded. The room settled, and the device quieted, its glow dimming back to a steady pulse. The warping of space around me faded, and gravity returned to normal. But something had changed. The air was thicker, heavier, with the weight of something immense, something that had just been unleashed, or perhaps only revealed. I realized then that I wasn't just witnessing the manipulation of technology or magic, I was witnessing the unraveling and remaking of the very fabric of the universe. The Techno mages were no longer simply human. They had transcended the limits of biology and technology. They were becoming something else entirely, something that could reshape reality itself. They had unlocked the power to not only bend the laws of nature, but to break them, to rebuild them in ways unimaginable. It was in that moment that I understood the full scale of what they had discovered. This was not just the power to control machines, it was the power to control time, space, and energy. The humans of Soul were no longer playing by the rules of the galaxy, they had rewritten those rules. What I had just witnessed was not a simple piece of technology, it was a manifestation of pure power, a power that could change the entire course of history. I stood there in awe. the weight of it settling over me like a dark cloud. I had come seeking answers, but now I had only more questions. What else were the techno mages hiding? What else had they uncovered? And most importantly, what would the galaxy do when they realized the power humanity now possessed? I turned to leave the chamber, but as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just walking out of a building, I was walking out of a threshold, crossing a boundary that no one had dared to cross before. The techno mages had opened a door, and I had glimpsed what lay beyond. I wasn't sure what it meant for humanity, for the galaxy, or for me, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the following days in a haze, unable to shake the images of what I had seen deep within that facility. The power the techno mages had unlocked was beyond my comprehension, and yet it was undeniable. It was as if the very nature of reality had been pulled back, exposing a raw, untapped force that could reshape the universe in ways no one could predict. I had returned to my ship, the Intrepid, after leaving the facility, but I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, as if the walls themselves were aware of my every move. The air felt charged, as if the faintest disturbance could ignite something catastrophic. It wasn't just the device that haunted me, it was the implications of what the techno mages had become. They were no longer just humans. They were something far more dangerous, a hybrid of science, and the unknown that I could not fully grasp. As I sat in the command chair of my ship, I couldn't help but think of the galaxy, how it would react when it learned that humanity had stumbled upon a force that defied everything. I'd spent years traveling across the stars, observing the power dynamics of the galaxy, watching as the old empires grew and fell, but none of them had ever encountered something like this. They had never faced an enemy that could bend the fabric of reality itself to their will. I couldn't remain idle. I had to understand what was at stake and what role humanity was going to play in the new order of things. If the signal had been a harbinger, then it wasn't just a call to explore or discover, it was a warning, a sign that humanity had discovered something that would either elevate us beyond the stars or drag us into the deepest abyss. The techno mages had opened a door, but what lay beyond it? Was this the beginning of an evolution or the end? As I navigated the ship's systems, I felt a sudden shift in the ship's sensors, a faint signal pulsing from the distance. At first I thought it was a stray signal, perhaps another anomaly, but this one was different. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. It carried the same pattern, the same rhythm, as the signal I had traced to the techno mage's hidden facility. But this time it was closer, much closer. It was as if someone was trying to reach me, to pull me back to that place. I hesitated for a moment. The last time I had gone into the unknown, I had uncovered something far more than I was ready to comprehend. But this was different. This wasn't an accident. Whoever was sending this message wanted me to find them, wanted me to understand. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't turn away. I punched in the coordinates, my hands moving with a sense of urgency. The path was set, and the ship's engines hummed to life, pushing the Intrepid forward at a steady pace. As I entered the coordinates into the ship's navigation system, I felt a twinge of unease. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew I had no choice but to follow. The journey took hours, but it felt like days. My mind raced with questions, none of which I could answer. Who was sending this signal? Were they related to the techno mages? And if so, what did they want? Were they the next step in the evolution of this new power, or were they something else entirely? As I approached the source of the signal, I found myself in another remote part of the system. This place was far from the main colonies, deeper in the space beyond the established borders. It was a place where few ships ventured, and I wondered how many had passed this way without ever knowing what lay hidden in the shadows. As I neared the coordinates, I saw the familiar distortion in the gravitational field, another hidden structure tucked away like the first. I docked the ship and approached the facility cautiously. This place, unlike the techno mage's compound, was stark, its design more functional than ornate. The walls were bare, the surface sleek and metallic, and there were no signs of life. Yet I knew something was here. The signal had led me here, and I felt a deep sense of inevitability. There was no turning back. I moved through the narrow corridors, my boots echoing on the metal floors. The silence was oppressive, as if the entire structure was holding its breath, waiting for something. The air was colder than it should have been, and I could feel the presence of something just beyond my reach, like a whisper in the dark. At the center of the facility, I found what I had been searching for. The room was dominated by a single, large device, unlike anything I had seen before. It was smaller than the machine the techno mages had used, but its presence was just as commanding. This one was surrounded by more intricate markings, symbols that seemed to shift and change the longer I looked at them. They were alive, much like the ones at the Techno Mage's compound, but there was something else here, something more intricate, more delicate. I approached the device cautiously. As my hand brushed against its surface, I felt a jolt of energy surge through me, a shock that traveled up my arm and sent a ripple of heat through my body. The device hummed to life, its lights flickering on in a pattern that mirrored the signals I had followed. It was alive. It was waiting for me, just like the Techno Mages had waited. But this device was different. This wasn't just a machine. It was a key to something far greater. And I understood, as the power surged through me, that this was only the beginning. Whatever this device was, it held the answers to the questions that had haunted me since I first received that strange signal. And in that moment, I realized that the galaxy would never be the same again. The hum of the device still resonated in my chest, a deep, pulsing vibration that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. It was as if the room itself was alive, reacting to my presence, drawing me in. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The markings on its surface flickered and shifted, an intricate dance of symbols that defied logic and meaning. They moved like water, rippling with intent, as though trying to communicate something beyond the boundaries of human understanding. I stepped closer, my fingers tingling as they hovered just above the surface. The energy emanating from the machine felt almost alive, a presence that filled the room with an unsettling power. It was like standing in the presence of something ancient, something that had been waiting for eons to be discovered. And now that it had found me, I couldn't escape. I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or in awe. The force that thrummed beneath my fingertips was not something I had ever encountered before. This was not technology in the conventional sense. It was something far more primal, more elemental, and in that moment, I knew it was not something humanity was ready for. As I stood there staring at the device, a sudden realization washed over me. This wasn't just a key to unlocking power, it was a link. A connection to something far greater, something beyond the boundaries of this world, beyond the galaxy itself. It was clear now that the Techno Mages had known this. They had uncovered it, just as I had, but their understanding of what it meant was far more advanced. They had woven themselves into this network, a part of it, but I was an outsider, a mere observer. I couldn't help but think back to everything I had learned about the Techno Mages in the short time I had spent with them. Their power wasn't just rooted in the manipulation of technology. It was rooted in something else. Something far more ancient. They had unlocked the ability to influence the very structure of the universe, to alter the rules of physics themselves. And I had seen the effects of their rituals, the way they moved in unison, as if guided by an unseen force. It was as if they were communing with the very fabric of reality, bending it to their will. But now, standing in front of this device, I realized that the Techno Mages were not the only ones who had found this power. There were others. Whoever had built this facility, whoever had left the signal, had known of its existence long before the Mages had arrived. This was not a new discovery. It was a rediscovery. The markings on the device, the symbols, they weren't just random, they were part of an ancient language, one that predated human civilization. The technology was a relic, yes, but it was more than that. It was a bridge between worlds, a connection to something older, more profound, something that could only be hinted at in the faintest memories of forgotten legends. The more I studied the device, the more I felt it pulling at me, as if beckoning me to understand, to learn, to become a part of it. I reached out, my hand trembling as I made contact with the cool surface. A shock of energy coursed through me, not painful, but overwhelming. It was as though the device had recognized me, had identified me as something more than just a curious traveler. It was responding to me, acknowledging my presence, and in doing so, it was unlocking something inside of me, something I didn't fully understand. Images flashed through my mind, fragmented, disjointed. I saw stars being born, planets colliding, civilizations rising and falling in the blink of an eye. I saw human ships, small and insignificant against the backdrop of an ancient, sprawling galaxy, and yet they carried something with them, something that made them different, something that had the potential to change everything. I saw the Techno Mages, their faces illuminated by the device's eerie glow, their eyes alight with purpose. But there were others, two figures cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden, their intentions unclear. I saw them watching, waiting, as if they had been following humanity's every move, anticipating this very moment. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me breathless and disoriented. My hand was still on the device, but it no longer felt like I was in control. The machine had taken over, guiding me, showing me only fragments of a larger picture, fragments that raised more questions than they answered. It was as if it was speaking to me, communicating in a language that my mind could barely comprehend. I stepped back, breaking contact with the device. The hum in the room faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. My heart raced as I tried to process what had just happened. The device had given me a glimpse, but it had also withheld something important. Whatever knowledge it held, it wasn't ready to share it with me. I wasn't ready. I knew then that I couldn't leave. Not yet. There was more to uncover, more to understand. But I also knew that I was not alone here. The signal had brought me to this place, but I wasn't the only one who had been drawn in. The Techno mages had already found it, and they were using it for their own purposes. They had already started to unravel its mysteries, to bend it to their will. But the others, those shadowed figures I had glimpsed, were also waiting, watching. They knew what the device was, and they knew what humanity could become if we truly understood it. And in that moment, I realized the truth. This was no mere discovery. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that would change the course of history. The galaxy would never be the same. The game had changed, and humanity was no longer playing by the old rules. The Techno mages were just the first wave, the harbingers of something far more powerful, far more dangerous. And I was standing at the precipice, looking into the abyss, unsure if I was ready to leap or if I had already fallen. The days that followed felt like a blur of disjointed thoughts and racing heartbeats. The device, its power, and the revelations it had bestowed upon me consumed my every waking moment. Each fragment of the vision, the stars, the planets, the figures, and the shadows haunted me. It was as though the device had planted a seed within me, one that grew with each passing hour, twisting my perception of reality. I could no longer view the galaxy, the universe, or even humanity the same way. Everything had changed, and yet, I was left with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was a quiet, unsettling certainty. The figures I had seen in my visions, those shadowed entities, were no longer just figments of my imagination. They were real, and they were close. My every move felt scrutinized, as though the universe itself was leaning in, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had thought the galaxy was a vast and impersonal place, filled with stars, ships, and distant empires, but now I knew the truth. It was all connected, woven together by threads I hadn't even begun to understand. I returned to the ship, pacing through the corridors as the ship's AI hummed softly in the background. There was no solace in the familiarity of the Intrepid. It felt like a cage now, a trap, and the walls of my sanctuary seemed to close in on me the longer I stayed inside. The outside world beckoned, but I wasn't ready to face it. I wasn't ready to face what I had uncovered. I needed to know more, needed to understand what the device was, who had built it, and why. The signal had led me here, and I knew it wasn't just a coincidence. But as I dug deeper, as I tried to uncover more, the answers eluded me. The data I had gathered from the facility, the symbols, the patterns, they all pointed to something ancient, something far beyond the reach of human knowledge. But the more I searched, the more I realized how little I truly knew. The knowledge I had glimpsed in the device's energy was a glimpse into a vast, unfathomable network, one that existed outside of time and space. And the more I learned, the more I realized that humanity wasn't just standing on the precipice of something, it was standing at the very center of a vast, cosmic web. I tried reaching out to the Techno mages, hoping they might have some answers, but they were distant, evasive. Their rituals, their magic, it wasn't just science. It was something older, something that blurred the lines between the material and the immaterial. I couldn't understand it fully, but I knew enough to know that they were hiding something. They had unlocked a power that went beyond even their control. They were playing with forces that could tear apart the fabric of reality itself, and I was beginning to fear that they were no longer in charge of what they had uncovered. The shadows had started to move. I could feel it. Every time I turned a corner, every time I stepped outside the ship, the presence of someone loomed just beyond my perception. They were watching me, waiting. The signal, the device, the Techno mages, all of it had drawn the attention of forces that existed in the deepest corners of the galaxy. I wasn't just caught in a web of secrets, I was a part of it now, and I was beginning to understand that there was no way out, no way to undo what had been set into motion. One night, as I sat in the cockpit of the Intrepid, staring out into the infinite darkness of space, a message blinked onto my screen. A single line of text, a simple command: return to the source. My fingers hovered over the controls, the weight of the words sinking in. I knew what it meant. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Whoever had sent this message knew where I was, knew what I had discovered. They were in control now, and I had no choice but to comply. I hesitated for only a moment before inputting the coordinates. The ship's engines hummed to life, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was as though the decision had already been made for me, as if I was no longer in control. The path ahead was set, and I was merely a passenger. The journey back to the facility was slow, deliberate, and the closer I got, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on me. I had thought I was prepared, thought that I could handle whatever lay ahead, but now, as the stars drifted by in a blur of light and shadow, I felt the full gravity of my actions. I was no longer an observer. I was a player in a game I didn't fully understand, a game where the stakes were higher than anything I had ever imagined. As the facility came into view, I could see the faint glow of the device, still pulsing with that strange, otherworldly energy. It was as if it had been waiting for me, calling me back. And in that moment, I knew that there was no going back. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning around. The path ahead was inevitable, and whatever lay at the end of it would change everything. The ship docked, and I stepped out onto the familiar, cold metal floors of the facility. The silence was oppressive, as if the entire place was holding its breath. I wasn't alone here, but it was hard to shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something far greater than myself. The figures I had seen in my visions were here, somewhere watching, waiting. I could feel their presence, the weight of their gaze upon me, though I could not see them. The device in the center of the room seemed to hum louder as I approached. It was calling to me, its energy pulsating with an urgency that mirrored my own racing thoughts. I knew that whatever happened next would determine the course of history. Humanity had uncovered something ancient, something powerful, and the galaxy was about to find out exactly what it meant. The final piece of the puzzle was within reach. All I had to do was take the next step. But as I moved closer to the device, the shadows shifted once more, and I realized with a sinking heart that the game was no longer just about power. It was about survival. The true battle had only just begun. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the hum of the device at its center, now louder, almost like a heartbeat, its rhythm in sync with my own. I had arrived here, not knowing what I would find, and yet somehow feeling like I had always been meant to return. The facility, cold and silent, felt as though it had been waiting for me, as if the walls themselves knew I would come back. And now, as I stood there mere feet from the device, I realized the gravity of the moment. I reached out, my fingers trembling ever so slightly as they hovered over the surface of the machine. The symbols on it twisted in the dim light, more alive now, more pronounced, as though the machine was reacting to my presence, acknowledging me. I knew this was no ordinary object, it was a living force, a consciousness that existed beyond the limits of human understanding. I could feel its pull, its awareness like a distant whisper brushing against the edge of my mind. As I made contact, a surge of energy rushed through me, not physical but mental, like a vast current of information flowing into my brain. My vision blurred, and I was no longer in the room. The stars, the galaxy, the entire universe seemed to unravel before me. I saw the beginning, the creation of life, the rise of civilizations across countless worlds, and the rise and fall of empires long forgotten. But among the stars, I also saw a darkness, a force far older than anything humanity had encountered. It lingered in the background, always present, watching, waiting. The energy surged again, and the vision shifted. This time I saw the Techno mages, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the device, their eyes wide with awe. But they weren't alone. There were others, figures cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden, their hands stretched out towards the machine. They were part of the same force, part of the same design. They had always been here, lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. I had been a pawn all along. The realization hit me like a hammer, and the energy from the device seemed to intensify in response, the power overwhelming me. It was as though the very fabric of the universe was being stripped away, revealing a truth I was not ready to comprehend. The shadows I had sensed earlier were not just observers. They were the architects of this power, the true originators of the device and everything it represented. The Techno mages, too, had been part of their plan. They had not stumbled upon this power by accident, they had been led to it, guided by a force far greater than themselves. The machine's hum reached a crescendo, a sound that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I couldn't look away, couldn't tear myself from its grasp. It was as though it had become a part of me, its energy fusing with my own. My mind raced, processing the information that was pouring into me, but it was too much. I could barely keep up with the revelations, the sheer magnitude of what I was being shown. The universe was a vast and intricate web, and humanity had only scratched the surface of its true nature. And yet, there was something deeply unsettling about it all. As I continued to receive the visions, one after another, I realized that the power of the device was not just a gift, it was a curse. It was a trap, a lure set by the shadowed figures to draw in those who were foolish enough to seek it. The Techno mages had unknowingly played their part, just as I had. We were all pawns in a much larger game, one that had been in motion for millennia. The room seemed to shift, and I found myself standing in a vast, empty space, surrounded by the dark silhouettes of the figures I had seen in my visions. They were not human, but something far older, something that had existed long before humanity had even begun to form. Their forms flickered in and out of existence, as though they were not entirely tied to the physical world. They circled me, their presence suffocating, their intent clear. One of them, its face shrouded in darkness, reached out, and I felt a wave of cold wash over me. It wasn't just the absence of warmth, it was a profound emptiness, as though the very concept of existence was being undone. The figures spoke without words, their voices not heard but felt. The meaning was clear. I had been chosen, but not for the reasons I had imagined. I was not meant to wield the power of the device. I was meant to fall. The universe had no place for humanity, no place for the life we had created. We were an anomaly, a mistake, and the time had come to correct it. The machine's hum grew louder, and the shadows began to converge. I felt their collective presence closing in on me, a tidal wave of force that was suffocating, overwhelming. I was powerless to resist, unable to break free from their grip. My thoughts scattered, and I struggled to hold on to myself, to my sense of identity. But the pull of the shadows, the power of the device, was too strong. I was becoming a part of something else, something I could neither control nor escape. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. The shadows vanished, leaving me standing in the facility once more, breathless and shaken. The room was silent again, the machine now dormant, its hum fading into the background. I was no longer sure of where I stood, no longer certain of what was real. The lines between the visions and the present had blurred, and I felt the weight of everything I had seen pressing down on me. I had glimpsed the true nature of the universe, and I knew then that humanity was not just a part of it, it was a disruption. We were a spark in the dark, and the universe had a way of extinguishing sparks that threatened its balance. I was no longer the person I had been when I arrived. The device had shown me the truth, but at a cost. I had crossed a threshold, and I could feel the shift inside me. The shadows had not just shown me the future, they had shaped it. The game was no longer just about knowledge or power, it was about survival. And as I stood there in the silence of the room, I knew that whatever came next would be a fight unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The true battle was about to begin, and humanity was no longer on the sidelines. We were players in a game where the stakes were nothing less than existence itself. Well, there you have it. The galaxy has always been full of secrets, but humanity, we're just getting started. If you think you've seen the full picture, just wait until the next chapter of this cosmic saga. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, because we're about to uncover even darker truths, and you won't want to miss what happens when humanity finally steps into the arena. Stay tuned, explorers, the story is far from over.